Good evening. Welcome to the Hopkins School Community Forum for April 3rd, 2024. My name is Nancy Kavanaugh. I'm the chair of the school committee, and I'd like just to begin the evening by starting at the end of the table and working our way around. If everyone could just introduce yourselves and say what your piece of this is.
So I'm Chris Eberly. I'm a project executive for Vertex. We're the town's owner's project manager.
Dawn Guariello, I'm a project architect with Perkins Eastman.
Dan Colley, project manager from Perkins Eastman.
Ricky Shapiro, I'm project manager with Commodore Builders.
Ed Corey, I'm a project superintendent with Commodore Builders.
Amanda Fargiano, I'm the vice chair of the school committee.
Matt Cotter, principal at Hopkins School.
Tim Person, Director of Facilities for the schools.
Carol Kavanaugh, Superintendent for the Hopkins Public Schools.
And Susan Rothemick, Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations for the schools.
Great.
And we should note Kate Starr is joining us in the audience as well. She's one of the project managers at Commodore who's working on the project.
Great. Thank you. So, and thank you all who are tuning in remotely or who will tune in afterwards to watch the video. This is obviously a big project for Hopkinton, and we want to make sure that all the answers, we have answers for people who have questions, and that we're able to get important information out for people ahead of when this project will go forward at annual town meeting in May. So we could look at just the next slide. Tonight, what we're going to go over, a schedule update, the plan and exterior development, an introduction to Commodore Builders and the logistics and phasing, and the project budget update and comparisons. So Dr. Kavanaugh, I'm going to...
All right. Thank you, Nancy. So I can kick this off with some discussion around the project origins. One thing that I want to point out is that as you're looking at this slide, you will notice that we are referencing both the Elmwood School and the Hopkins School project. And I think it's important to look at those two projects sort of in the entire context of what we're trying to achieve. We have hired the same OPM and the same design firm for both of these projects. And I think that that's advantageous to the community in that they really understand both of these projects very deeply. And so when they do that, they can take a look at how all of these pieces of the puzzle sort of fit in together. And in some ways, that ends up being very cost effective for us. So I'd like to walk you through the three grids that you are seeing up there. It's important to note that even though we talk about a system-wide study that took place in January of 2023, it has been no secret to the Hopkinton Public Schools that we have had space constraints going on for a number of years now. In essence, our enrollment is outpacing our physical plans. So the very first system-wide study we did was back in 2019, and we are still going. So if you take a look at that very first set of grids that says Hopkins capacity current grade configuration, you can take a look at sort of where we are today for our grades 4 and 5. We are living in the yellow in terms of enrollment, and when you're living in the green, it means that you have some flexibility, you have enough room to accommodate the learning in your physical plan. In the yellow, you're not there, and so we really are not there currently at the Hopkins School. Repeatedly we say that when Hopkins was built, it had 24 general education classrooms. We've added 4 modular classrooms along the way, and to get to 30 general education classrooms, we are currently using 2 interior windowless classrooms. So you can see that we're kind of there on that fast track to red. If we move over to the grid in the center, and we take a look at Hopkins capacity, if Elmwood School had turned out to be a 2-3 school, we would have built a 2-3 school and it would have kept in the green. We would have been able to accommodate all of those kids, but there would have been one downside to that, and it's a big downside, in that the MSBA is helping us to pay for grade 4 to move into an entirely new and spacious facility. So as you're looking at that slide, and you can see grades 4 and 5 staying red there in the middle, there is a beauty that we are able to kind of pull grade 4 out, but still we have the issue of not being able to accommodate grades 5 and 6. When we have looked at enrollment studies, longer projections, you have just over 800 students if you keep it a 4 or 5 school. You have just over 800 students if you make it a 5-6 school. And so something's got to give in that Hopkins space. And that's really why we're here tonight having a conversation about enlarging the Hopkins School. by about 28,000 square feet, which is what we need to be able to accommodate grade 5 and 6, along with the academic programming we currently have for our 5th and 6th graders. If you slide over to that third chart, you can see, again, as I've just articulated, that 5 and 6 remain red without an addition. But you can see that when you move that middle school to grade 7 and 8 only, that column stays green. And that's very important for people to see, because in the trajectory of the whole project, when you complete the Elmwood project with the partnership of the MSBA, and if we are able to complete this 5-6 school addition, we are saving ourselves a lot of space and a lot of money in terms of pushing off any possible project that might need to be done at the middle school. You can see it carries out for a number of years and that column stays green. And so it's really advantageous to make sure that the Elmwood project is part of this plan and it goes along with the Hopkins project. It's not a singular project, but these projects are all tied together with great upstream, I think, value for the community.
So we wanted to talk about where we are now, currently in the project. And currently, we're about to begin the permitting process, so we'll be going before the Conservation Commission as well as before the Planning Board in the coming month. We're also completing construction documents. We passed the 60% construction document milestone today, and we'll be estimating once again the project with the hope of having updated and possibly lower numbers at the end of the month prior to town meeting. We're also in the process of beginning a pre-construction phase, and where the pre-construction phase is valuable is it gives us the opportunity to understand the site a little better, do a little work that we plan to do during the April vacation week, so that we can better understand some of the unknowns and better inform what needs to go into the project. And sometimes that can also have a cost impact as well. Up until this point, we've been working on the previous approval of design funding, and the town voted to approve $3 million for that design funding last year. And this is, we're further moving towards completing that design. And as part of that, we're gonna go before town meeting in early May, and then the ballot, hopefully a few weeks later. And that's going to be when we propose the construction funding. And so when we talk about the upcoming ballot vote, that ballot vote is really to complete the remainder of the necessary funding so that we can continue through construction. If that goes well, we plan to begin construction with some early work as early as July, and that's really to prepare the site so that the students can return. And then the full construction package will be approved likely in September. If all goes according to plan, we would be looking at opening as a 4-5 school, roughly a year in advance of Elmwood, and we would operate as that 4-5 school for that first year. Then, a year later, we would look at, if the growth has continued as has been anticipated, relocating the modular from Elmwood, as Elmwood is no longer used as a school, to this building, and we would also at that point open as a 5-6 school in the fall of 2027 for the first time. I'll turn it over to the design team to speak to the design itself.
Great. So as a reminder, this is an addition renovation project to accommodate just over 800 students. What you're looking at is the floor plan. To the right side of the dashed line, that is the existing building, which will be renovated, some areas more than others, and the addition will be to the west, which you see on the left-hand side of the screen. I'll speak to the addition first. It's about 28,000 square feet, as Dr. Kavanaugh mentioned. It's got a 6,000 square foot gym, which will replace the existing gymnasium in kind, but also has a 3,000 square foot multi-purpose gym adjacent to it to provide 3 teaching stations for the additional capacity that we're building the school to accommodate. That gym will have supportive space in the form of OT-PT adjacent and some offices, as well as additional classrooms to the north, which you see just to the north side of the gym, and additional sped. So collectively, there's about 6 general classrooms added. There's 2 additional sped rooms added. I'll get to the second floor in a moment and point out what is in the addition there, but I'll speak to the renovation piece on the first floor. The existing gym will become the new cafeteria and stage. It will allow for space to enlarge the existing servery, which is inadequately sized and needs to be larger to accommodate the student enrollment, and also allows the kitchen to get, the existing kitchen to become larger in its existing location and take over some of the servery space to make it adequately sized as well. The music programs become substantially larger. There's a large multi-purpose, multi in that it can be divided and made into 2 smaller, but a large band, orchestra, chorus room, which will accommodate a substantial amount of students, as well as a general music classroom that almost triples what is existing in the building. The administrative area will become a little larger with a few extra offices. The nurse gets a much larger suite. The media center remains mostly intact, but there will be some additional small group rooms to support the special ed program, and we will add a science, tech, engineering, an STE room, which doesn't currently exist. If you go to the second floor, thank you, Chris. You can see the addition still to the left of the dash line. We've got an additional art room, so that doubles what's there. We've got one existing art room, which will have some minor modifications made to it, but that will add a second art room to the school. Again, we've got a special ed space and some classrooms in the addition with some mechanical. And the gym will be a double height space, both for the main gym as well as the multi-purpose gym. And then on the second floor around the classrooms, it's mostly general classrooms and some science rooms. And there will be science-specific rooms to support the some 5th grade curriculum as well as the 6th grade science curriculum. We previously on the forum, in the first forum, spoke to a lot of the interior spaces and that showed interior renderings. So if you're interested in seeing that, you might go back and watch that meeting. We thought tonight we would show some of the exterior design. And what we're trying to do, what you see here mostly with a little bit of the modular to the right-hand side of the screen and a little bit of the existing building on the far left-hand side, we've sort of tried to weave the design in with the existing building as well as the modular that will come over from Elmwood. It looks substantially like the modular that's at Hopkins, but that will be relocated, as mentioned by Chris. And that's what you see on the right-hand side of the screen. So this is the front side of the building, the north, which is at the entry and car drop. And it will have matching brick to the existing building and will look substantially like the existing facade. And I think we have a second rendering of that as well, where you can see where the 2 buildings kind of merge and come together.
So one of the things that we've heard during the process is, why can't we just add more modulars? And that's a valid question, but the way that the building is designed now and the way that we've done the addition is separated from that existing building by a firewall, which means that there are actually now 2 buildings from a building code perspective on the site. So there's the original building that was built in the late 90s, and then the addition which we're being proposed, which is substantially separated. The original building from the 90s is at its maximum size, which means there's no additions that can be done to that building without pushing it over that limit and making it non-compliant with the current building code. So adding modulars is really not an option to the existing building. It wouldn't be able to support them, and it wouldn't meet the code, which is why we are proposing a substantially separate addition separated by a firewall, not just a series of modulars added to the Hopkins.
On the overall construction schedule, we are anticipating it to start sometime in the middle of July and run to the fall of 2026. And throughout that, we do have a number of different phases we're gonna look at, with the first one being the work in this summer, which will be the enabling work that we're gonna do basically to set up the construction of that new addition. Then our first phase, which is gonna be the bulk of the construction, which will run from September of 2024 until February of 2026 while we do construct that addition and kind of do some of that new exterior upgrades around the site. Ed's going to take you through that detail a little bit more in a minute here. But that is going to be the bulk of our construction phase. And then after we do complete that addition in February 2026, we're going to turn that over to the school, and that will be active and be in use, at which point we will go into some of the more major renovation work, things like the kitchen and that STE lab that Don had mentioned previously. And then while that is happening, there's going to be over those 2 summers, which we will be doing a lot of the renovation work in those timeframes as well. That's going to be a lot of the light construction work in the areas of the existing classrooms where we're just doing things like replacing ceilings and replacing floors and paints and that type of stuff. So kind of starting to look at the logistics and how we're going to approach this construction plan with basically from the biggest bird's eye view is the truck route and how we're going to direct traffic to that site. And our goal here is to really use exit 50 and hop on Route 85 there to avoid any congestion on Main Street in Hopkinton, keep any of the construction vehicles and keep access in that area to a minimum and try to avoid that as best we can. And then once we do enter the site, our goal here is really to avoid the Hopkins School as much as we can and disturb that as little as possible. Our plan is to take really a right on that loop road and kind of go around the whole area and then enter on the, where you see on the left-hand side there is a small one-way we will need to use for two-way traffic to do that. And we're going to do that by kind of directing traffic there with the flagger as necessary and then avoiding access in any of the peak times such as parent drop-off or parent pickup to avoid any delays or impacts to the school and the parents and the children there.
So in this slide, you'll see what we just discussed, the traffic through Loop Road, how we created our construction access onto the site. We've installed our construction fencing in establishing a traffic pattern for phase 1. And really, you'll see as we go through all these phases that our primary goal with this is to maintain a safe school zone throughout the entire project. So we moved on to phase 1, starting this summer and running through June of 2025. This phase is some enabling work over the summer and the start of the addition construction. Our first step in the enabling is to install paving and create a safe play area for the students and to expand the parent pickup and drop-off area north of the building, so that paving area is that grade-in area just kind of center top of the building. And as well, we would maintain some existing turf to use as a recess area, and that is that green shaded area to the upper left of the drawing.
And I just want to point out another key point here, which is that a lot of these different phases as we move through these maximize the amount that we need to touch the site. And so as part of doing an occupied renovation, we're maximizing the use of each section of the site so that we can ensure that we're maintaining the necessary number of parking spaces. We're maintaining opportunities for the kids to have recess areas. And we're maintaining access to areas where they can continue to have PE outside. All while trying to effectively and efficiently build a fairly large addition and manage the fairly complex site changes that support that addition.
So south of the building, we'll be working some of the paving to allow for the buses to roll off or whirl away without any disruptions. The blue lines you see on the screen up there are the designated protected paths that we're going to establish from the building to both the recess or the parking areas. And we haven't shown it on any of our screens up here, but I think it's important that everybody understands our general working hours are 7 to 3:30 p.m. So we won't be causing any disruptions to the afternoon sports or activities. So now we've moved on to phase 2 in this slide, June of 2025 to February of 2026. So we're continuing our addition work and reworking the south parking area. The logistics for construction, the recess areas, and the parent drop-off remain essentially the same. And that's kind of our goal throughout the project. We really want to minimize any changes in disruptions for the students and faculty. We want to have their paths get set up and maintain that as long as we can. During the summer of 2025, we'll rework that lot in Loop Road south of the building. And this creates some additional parking and again keeps the bus route safely away from the construction site. So now we've moved on to phase 3 in this slide, and we're almost there. I hope everybody's happy. Our job's done. The new addition is complete. It's occupied, and people are in there. The parking lots and the drop-off area are fully operational. Our construction really just is focused on that isolated area to the left of the building, west of the building, on some play fields. I touched quickly on exterior work through all these slides. Ricky's going to go into a little more detail now on some of the interior work.
Yeah, so as far as the interior work goes, there's going to be really 2 major phases associated with that. The first one being the construction of that new addition. At that point, we're going to really leave the existing building alone almost entirely, aside from the summer time frames where we'll be doing some light construction. But our goal is really to have no disruptions to the school activities at that point while we are constructing that addition from or from September to February 2026. Really, the second major phase of the interior work is going to be when we do turn over that addition space for the school's use, and then kind of go into some of the more major interior renovations like the cafeteria and some of those science classrooms as well as the remaining light renovation work that we didn't get to that first summer.
So let's talk about cost. We shared this slide. It's available at the MSBA on their website extensively during the Elmwood process. And one of the key pieces of feedback we got from our last forum in February was that the community was interested in some of the similar comparisons that we have done in presenting the Elmwood project to the community. And so we've tried to look at ways that we can create similar comparisons so that the community can understand how the Hopkins project has come together and what the cost of the Hopkins project means in relationship to other cost issues. We've talked at length in the Elmwood process about there was fairly steady construction inflation right up until the start of the pandemic. And the pandemic really showed a boom in incremental, significant incremental steps that drastically upturned that inflation over the last few years. And that has continued. You can see this is the most recent data, and a lot of the projects that are forecast to be moving forward in the 2025 and 2026 bidding climate are ranging from as little as the $700 a square foot with a single project, the 714 that you all know from Elmwood, but they're going as high as $1,000 a square foot in some of the most recent PSRs that have been issued to the MSBA. Now this chart deals solely with new construction, and we talked at length about the variability of new construction. Hopkins, as it's proposed, is not a new construction project, and it's difficult to compare it to a new construction project. New construction often has established site available to it, but as we saw with Elmwood, sometimes it's a site that needs to be cleared. The contractor is in complete control of the situation in new construction, whereas an occupied site, we have to worry about the interaction with the neighbors and the interaction especially with our closest neighbors, which are going to be the kids of Hopkinton that are attending Hopkins at the time. There's special attention that has to be paid, both from a schedule perspective, from a noise perspective, and from a mitigation perspective to ensure that we can safely and efficiently build the building for the workers, but also safely build the building for the students who are around us and allow them to continue their educations. In an effort to address the question that was raised at the last forum, we compared a lot of the projects that are out to bid, there's 8 of them, over the next 11 months. From July 2024, when we expect to get our initial pricing on Hopkins, all the way to June of '25, when Elmwood will be bid to a general contractor. And there's a remarkable consistency amongst a lot of this pricing. Overall, it, on average, is $758 a square foot. Hopkins is a $400 per square foot total project. And I say that in using the MSBA's method of establishing construction dollars per square foot, of taking the total construction budget divided by the square footage of the building. That includes both addition and renovation and site work. In order to try and provide a comparison to new construction pricing, we have taken a look at the breakout price that's associated with just the addition, as well as some of the site work. We can't put all the site work associated with the project in the addition number because the addition only makes up 26% of the total project. So in an effort to give you the most accurate comparison, we took the $713 a square foot for the building itself, and we added in 26% of that site work cost. That site work includes, as you can see from the logistics plan, touching a large portion of almost every part of the existing Hopkins site. So it's fairly extensive. We talked a lot in construction about the Elmwood project similarly had to touch every square foot because it's an existing forest. And a site that already is playing fields would be much easier to deal with. But between the added scope that we are pursuing as part of the Hopkins project, whether it's the geothermal wells that are supporting the building, or the necessary moves on site that Commodore outlined that show you how we have to change the site over time to accommodate both the construction logistics and the necessary educational logistics of a school, we felt that using that 26% of that total site number gave you the best apples to apples comparison. There's some other things that come into this comparison that also have to be taken into account. Elmwood's site is 18 acres, so it's almost 3 times the size of Hopkins' site. Elmwood's building is almost 6¼ times the size of the Hopkins addition at 175,002 square feet versus 28,035 square feet. And there's certainly some economies of scale that come with doing that. For every foot of building that you build, whether that building is a wall or a floor, it has a different cost. And there is much more wall and a lot less floor in a smaller building. We're also pursuing a CM at Hopkins because it's an occupied renovation. Teaming with Commodore will allow the town to make sure that the work inside and outside the fence is managed so that we can have quiet days when the students need quiet days, so we can provide a safe environment when the work is outside the fence, and so that we can accommodate all the needs of a site, and we can have the flexibility to adjust over time. Elmwood is more distanced from Marathon. The contractor can exist day to day without affecting Marathon at all, and the interactions with both Hayden Row and the Marathon site are much more controlled. All of that leads to more cost savings. We thought a better comparison was to use the addition and renovation slide. So in the same way that the MSBA publishes new construction information, they also publish renovation and addition information. And so we reached out to the MSBA and we asked them for some of the most recent addition and renovation projects so that we could understand that not only their price, but also what type of project they are so that we can better compare it to Hopkins. So on this chart, you can see all of the renovation projects that have been built per the MSBA, or that have been bid per the MSBA over the last 22 months. We've also highlighted the percentage that is new construction and the percentage that is renovation as part of this, and the total square foot, so you get a sense of how this compares to the total square footage of Hopkins, which is 106,292 square feet, when viewed as both the renovation and the addition. When you look at this, you see a couple of consistencies. The projects that are a heavier new construction addition, such as the school in Lawrence, the Spencer East Brookfield School, have higher construction costs because so much more of them are new construction mixed with less renovation. The more that the school is renovated, overall, the cost is lower. And I'll note that each one of these costs is the bid cost, not an escalated cost, despite some of these being almost a year and a half old. We found that on the Webster, which is an entire renovation, the Peabody, which is mostly a renovation, and the Lowell projects, that they were much closer to a 486 to a 456 cost per square foot number. When we looked at the Hopkins school, you can see that we're at a $400 per square foot number, including the site work and all construction costs. And we've also already identified some VE that we believe will bring that number down.
So over time, as we continue to look at this project, one thing that we are constantly doing is drilling down on both the scope and the cost decisions. So some of the things that we've looked at and really tried to pull back on within the renovation, you can see with the colors, the purple again is a heavy renovation, the orange is medium, the classrooms in the light green are light, and then you can see the extra light. So what we've done is looked at really limiting the replacement of finishes in the renovation, and that means touching tiles, walls, floors. Limited the scope to the end-of-life replacement for mechanicals and only code-triggered upgrades within that part of the building. And we've scaled back within different areas. If we were not touching a classroom, for example, then there was no renovation within there. However, if we were up in the ceiling, then we may also replace the ceiling tiles as we back out. So that's where you're really looking very strategically at what was being touched within the classrooms, and really focusing on upgrades that had the learning value all throughout the building. And then lastly, really targeting the mechanical upgrades, looking at maximizing the value, what can be tied back to the new construction and really improve efficiency, but only if it was practical and cost effective. For example, there's one unit that's in the existing building that really spreads throughout the building, kind of like spider webs. That unit will not be replaced this way because it just creates heavy construction. So really looking at what is maximizing the value of those mechanical upgrades.
Now, we recognize that the price at design development is more than the price that was presented at schematic design. And there's a number of reasons for that. As the design developed, it was identified that a larger stormwater recharge system was necessary, that we're continuing to look at opportunities to find the most efficient power service and generator service to the new addition and the existing building. And some of the added HVAC upgrades increased the electrical load, which prompted some of those changes. We identified a code trigger that requires a full fire alarm replacement, and we identified that in order to most efficiently prepare the school for the arrival of students in the fall, there were certain enabling costs that were much more efficient and less impactful if we did them as part of the summer. We have some items that we're still reviewing, like whether we have adequate floor prep in the renovation and whether we have adequate moisture mitigation for the new flooring that's going to be installed. We also know that there's some ledge that exists in the building, and so we have some allowances currently within the number for that, but we also have a plan to study that further so that we can understand the true impact and ways that we can plan around that. There's some additional acoustic treatments that needed to be added. And there were additional project requirements, winter conditions, temp labor, and safety that were added to the project as we settled on a logistics for how we would move the project forward, working with Commodore. We're also looking at builder's risk insurance and ensuring that we have an accurate cost for that. With potential new electrical service, we have new back charges for the utilities that we may have to pursue. We're currently signing up a commissioning agent, and so we're identifying that. We'll be speaking with the school committee about that tomorrow. And we're refining our FF&E and technology budgets to make sure that we're doing it in a way that makes the most sense for how the IT department functions, so that we deliver a system that they don't have to revisit. We also introduced as part of a CM a contingency, and that contingency is there to make sure that we're giving you the best price possible, and it accounts for things that may not be known in that price from the beginning. But we have not finished determining the price for this project. While we know we need to present a price for town meeting on April 11th, we're continuing to look at ways to bring the cost down, and that will continue as we estimate the 60% CDs and bring that final estimate to town meeting on May 6th. We're already looking at ways to reduce the number of wells as a result of our test well results. We're looking at doing some test pits and borings to understand ways we can avoid that ledge removal. We're going to dive deeper into some of the CM logistics and phasing to make sure we have the most efficient plan possible. We pulled back on some of the initial plans for outdoor spaces to find something that was more cost effective, but also to identify things that we would not be purchasing later in the project. By hiring a CM, we have a little more flexibility in how we procure things, and so we have the opportunity, if savings in the budget amount materializes halfway through the project, we may be able to pursue some of the things that we know are installed in the last phase of the project. We're looking at ways that we can reduce some of the site work. We're looking at a solution that may simplify the electrical service and generators. And we've been able to scale back some of the sprinkler piping that was initially forecast in the design development set. Tomorrow evening, we'll be presenting $1,080,000 worth of VE savings to the school committee. And if they were to accept all of those savings, it brings the cost per square foot of the project down by about $10 a square foot. We're also looking at the other soft costs. As we reached out to the insurer last week to get the real quote for the builder's risk, and we hope to have that available so that we're accurately pricing that in the ask at town meeting. We've engaged Eversource to determine what's necessary in terms of our existing service, and if a service upgrade is not required, then we no longer have utility back charges. We'll be presenting the commissioning recommendation tomorrow to school committee, and that includes a significant reduction from what was originally forecast. And we're going to continue to visit the owner's contingency, the contingencies that are outside of the CM's contingency, so that we make sure that we've accurately prepared for the unknowns and risks that are associated with a project of this type. So ultimately, we're looking at $3 million that gets us to the point of starting construction that's already been approved by the town, and a cost estimate that, after our initial look at it, was at $42,520,000. We also are looking at soft costs that are currently $7,960,000, which comes together as a project budget of $53,480,000. We mentioned that there's $1,080,000 in VE options we'll be presenting tomorrow evening. We know that of that $53 million, that $3 million has already been appropriated, so it doesn't need to be requested at town meeting. We also know that there's $850,000 that was already appropriated for mechanical equipment replacements, and so we've looked at targeted solutions to replace some of that existing equipment as part of the project. We've engaged with Mass Save, and we're currently following up on the Inflation Reduction Act, and while that won't lower the ask at town meeting, the potential $1.3 to $2 million we may get back as part of those projects or programs has the potential to lower the amount that needs to be financed when the tax rates are determined. Ultimately, we are currently forecasting that the funding ask at town meeting will be no greater than $49 million.
All right, so before we close our presentation, we frequently get questions about the choices that the community is going to make. And people will say, what if this passes? What if this doesn't pass? So I'd like to really review some of those choices. In the event that we're not moving forward with an addition, our grade 5 could remain alone at the Hopkins School. This is a somewhat ironic situation because then we would have a single grade, and even if it gets to be 400 students, in a building that would be oversized for it. So that would leave an awful lot of space there that would be sort of unused. The second option would be to continue to have grade 5 at the Hopkins School. And again, this would be if there were no addition. And we could move a portion of the grade 6 students into that space just so that we wouldn't be leaving space unused. But what that would mean is that the current middle school has facilities that accommodate the related arts that our grade 6 students take. The current Hopkins School does not have those facilities, and so what would have to happen is kids would go in as 6th graders into Hopkins, and then they would have to migrate back to the middle school, or they would start at the middle school and then they would have to leave and go to Hopkins. So there is that disjointedness, which is not great for kids. And then the other issue really is that you're not moving teachers in classrooms because it's physically impossible to do that sort of in an overnight or a weekend basis. So that would mean that students would have probably 2 different math teachers, 2 different ELA teachers, 2 different science teachers, at least within the course of a year. Again, that's disruptive to our kids' education. In the event that the project does go forward, both grades 5 and 6 would be at Hopkins. It would be an opportunity to give our grade 5 kids increased related arts. Again, we talked, just as we did at the start of this, if you pull the grade 6 students out of that middle school, what's going to afford us is only having grade 7 and 8 in the middle school is just keeping that in the green, keeping that space, so that we're not going to be looking at some kind of addition or renovation at the middle school, because that building is able to accommodate, I mean, right now we have just under 1,000 kids in it. Even if you had 2 400-student classes in there, you would still be well under that 1,000. If we also want to think about what this would cost, when our town manager had his consolidated budget report back on January 28th, what he did was he took all of the FY25 capital items and talked about what the impact that would be on the sort of median house price in Hopkinton. So the tax impact in the peak year of borrowing for all of the FY25 capital projects would be about $505 on the average house price in Hopkinton. And the average house price, just for, people's information, is about $852,400. And so I think that wraps us up, and we are prepared to take people's questions.
Okay, so I don't see anybody here in the audience for questions, but are there questions online?
We do not have any questions on the Zoom. We did get an email question, if we're going to take that. We have to take the email question
Yes,
from someone who said they could not attend the forum.
okay, I don't have that pulled. I may have missed that last.
I have it.
Okay, that would be great if you could read that.
It's a 2-part question. The first part talks about many different conversations at the school committee workshop around the choices, and what if we don't do this. The question is not what happens if we don't do it, because it seems like something we need, but what are some of the wants versus needs? For instance, do we need a geothermal HVAC system? Do we need a second gymnasium or a second art room? Do we need to move the gym to the addition? So I think the general question here is, with some of those new spaces, the multi-purpose room, the second art room, could we just speak to why those are necessary? And is there anything that we could gain by maybe not doing some of those different spaces that we currently don't have?
I'm happy to take the gym and the art room question.
thank you.
And then if there are other questions that people would like to respond to, that would be very helpful. We very frequently talked about teacher caseload. And so if, for example, I'm a related arts teacher at the Hopkins School currently, I can teach 6 periods in the day. That's what the agreement is between the Hopkinton Teachers Association and the school committee is. And so if I can teach 6 periods over a 5-day week, that means that I can teach 30 sections. Currently at Hopkins, with about 687 students, 688 students, we have exactly 30 sections that need to go to art, for example, because we have 16 fifth grades and 14 fourth grades. And so that fits that grid perfectly. Our 16 fifth grades and our 14 fourth grades make up 30, and the art teacher is able to teach 30 sections in a week. Once you go beyond those 30 sections, not only do you need another teacher, but you need another space for that teacher to teach in. And so when we talk about an additional art room, we need that additional space, but the 6th graders currently have a media art course right now at the middle school, and so that would be one of the related arts that we are offering. So when we create another art room, it might just be a little bit differently organized so that we can offer a different form of art. And that really is true of all of our related arts. It's true of music, and I think one of the things that we may not have talked about tonight, but that new facility, and we would love for people to tour it, will have an amazing space for our kids who are doing band, chorus, and orchestra. If you visit the Hopkins School now, that space is so tiny that those ensembles and our chorus can't use that space. They cannot gather in that space physically because they just don't fit. So those are the kinds of enrollment issues that we have, and that's why we do need another gym. I know, Don, you spoke to this earlier about the gym, but when we talk about replacing a 6,000 square foot gym with a 6,000 square foot gym, it's really just a replacement in kind. And so it might feel like we're doing something very different, but we're not. And the cafeteria we have now is, again, so small that we are pushing into that gym, and we're pushing into that gymnasium, which means that, yes, we really do need a new gymnasium to be able to accommodate not just school needs, but also the community use of that facility, because I know the community uses it frequently. And I don't know if there were other parts of the question that...
Well, I think too, as we get bigger, that's the purpose of why we are looking to add the multi-purpose room, is to add those extra sections of PE.
Yes.
Without that space, we couldn't add extra sections to cover the need for PE as the population gets bigger.
You know, I just want to comment on what you said too. I had a lot of these same questions as this person who's writing in. You know, do we really need these spaces? Can we cut back? And then the school committee had an opportunity to tour the current school and sort of both see what's happening today and also see where these new spaces will go. And it really was eye-opening for me. I think the cafeteria space, the servery, that incredibly small for the population that's being served. And, you know, looking at where the gym and the additional spaces will be in the art room. And, you know, again, I think going into the school today, you can really appreciate that it is packed. Every corner, every closet has been converted to a space for students. There really is no extra space anywhere. And as we look to add more students, the enrollment growth alone is going to drive the need. And I think what Dr. Kavanaugh, what you just said, is in places like with the art room, where we can accommodate the enrollment, but also accommodate a shift in curriculum as well, that to sort of bring our curriculum forward, is where we're taking advantage of the fact that we have to do something, but now we're doing it even better, not for more cost because we need the space, but doing it in a way that really supports our current curriculum needs. So that,
We have another public forum on the 30th of April for this project, and we are considering opening up the Hopkins School an hour earlier, just so that if there are people in town who would like to see that facility and become informed voters at town meeting, they can come on in and see exactly what we're talking about, because sometimes when you describe it, I don't think it has as much of an impact as if you are in there kind of living it.
I wonder if you...
guess I would just add on the kitchen piece, so we had 2 designs. We were originally looking at potentially moving the kitchen into the new space and leaving the gym where it is. And, you know, went through our discussions, we thought it would be, or we found it to be less expensive because the infrastructure for the kitchen is already in place where it is, rather than have to build all that out new. So
Yeah.
that went into part of our decision-making on moving the gym and not the kitchen into the space.
And the physical education teachers were very happy to have the gymnasium out closer to the fields.
Right, that makes sense. There was a part of the question talking about the geothermal wells, and do we need a geothermal system? I don't know if you could talk to that at all.
I think one of the things that the community should be aware of is that this is a shift that is happening statewide. Mass Save, many people might have heard of it from upgrading their home insulation or getting a rebate on their boiler, has made the decision that for commercial projects, anything that increases your gas load, they'll no longer support with any type of rebate. So they've completely gone away from any type of rebate associated with that. And so we're looking at 300 to 500,000 from Mass Save, depending on ultimately where we get, both from an amount of systems that are installed, but also from the overall energy use reduction that the project has at the end of the job. And so that money wouldn't be available if we didn't pursue the types of options that we're pursuing. There's also the Inflation Reduction Act, which provides for a significant rebate of electrification systems such as we're pursuing here. And so that has the potential to offset a lot of that tax increase in year 1 and 2 after the construction's complete, when those rebates begin to come to fruition. We also know that the school had already engaged in a study of how to adjust systems within the building, and we looked at multiple types of systems. As Susan mentioned, the study included looking at both conventional systems and also ways to upgrade them, and the school district has been really at the forefront of chasing sustainability and sustainable practices with how they've pursued a lot of the projects with the extensive use of solar in town. And there was a life cycle cost that was done to determine which system had the best payoff. Life cycle costs are most useful when you're going to be a long-term owner of a building, and a school is a perfect example of that. And so looking at that information and understanding that inflation is not limited to construction or food or the grocery store, but also energy sources, makes the geothermal make the most sense for some of the systems that we're upgrading.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I know on the school committee, obviously, we've voted a lot of solar projects, we voted a number of projects, partly because the town itself has voted to be committed to sustainability, but more importantly, from a budgetary perspective, knowing the operating costs are reduced so significantly by putting these efficient systems in place that don't rely on fossil fuels. And so in the long run, the cost of ownership, I believe, is so much lower for this type of system. I want to finish up this question. Thank you for the answer. Let's see. I guess it's not so much a question, but just the person who wrote in was surprised to learn that the modulars were not coming over as part of the budgeted cost of this expansion. And I don't know if we want to talk to that. I know that the modulars will be in use until Elmwood is completed. So I don't know if there's anything else to say about the modulars. I know that we're building all the hookups, and maybe you could speak to that, what we're doing to ready the space, and what it will cost, estimate to bring, is the question, to bring them over later.
There are a number of factors that go into that decision. The relocation of the modulars adds 4 classrooms to what is proposed at the Hopkins school. We're planning a location, we're gonna hold off on some of the plantings in that area. We are going to the planning board and Concom with our ultimate plan for when that is complete. But as you mentioned, Elmwood is not out of service. Elmwood, the building now, is not out of service until a year after. It's possible that our CM, while they have the option to pursue that work, if we still like them at the end of the project, but at the same time, it's not part of what they're proposing now because they'd be sitting on their hands for a year waiting for it to happen. And so that factors largely into it. The fact that it doesn't come out of use for a year is a significant part, but also the Elmwood is a separate project with a separate budget that we'll be looking at on a separate trajectory. It'll still have a year of construction to go. This project will be complete, and the dynamics in town could change. We've heard many times from residents in many of the forums that we've done, what if the growth doesn't come? And so by not committing to the modulars now with the budget appropriation, we're not necessarily committing to spending that money.
The other piece to keep in mind, and what we've talked about previously, one of the strategies of waiting on the modulars is at that point in time, both the Elmwood project would be completed and the Hopkins project would be completed. And so the thought process is between those two projects, leftover contingency could fully fund the pulling of the modular classrooms over. And if the school committee will remember, at the last meeting, we talked about 4 projects that we have completed between the high school addition, the roof project, and 2 others. We had over $1 million left over from those projects, again, mostly from contingencies. So while we look at contingency and we use that to evaluate the risk of projects and making sure to protect the town from overruns, at the end of the project, those contingencies become available. So that is another strategy that we're looking at. So the potential of bringing those modulars over with leftover contingencies from 2 very large projects could cover those costs.
Thank you.
Okay. Still no additional questions?
No one on Zoom, nope.
Okay. Well, so I appreciate, I don't want to hold people here longer, and I know that a lot of people watch these after the rebroadcast, so a special thanks to HCAM for recording the meeting and also providing it for people to view afterwards. As Dr. Kavanaugh said, we do have another public forum coming up on the 30th, so in time for questions to be asked ahead of town meeting. I know that it will likely be discussed at Know Your Vote on the 29th as well, so lots to come, and people can, continue to send emails in with additional questions for us, so. All right. Anybody have last words they want to share before we adjourn for the evening?
No, just a thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.